BSides DC would like to thank all of our sponsors, and a special thank you to all of our speakers, volunteers, and organizers for making 2018 a success.
So that is what we were told to do, to say when we are going to get started. So good morning. Thank you for coming to the first session of track number 3. My name is Kathleen Smith, and this is community-based career development. And one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about this is most of the conferences that happen within the information security, information assurance, cybersecurity community, all are volunteer run. And it's interesting that as an industry, we really rely on volunteers to get a lot of things done. But many people are not looking at their volunteering through a career development lens. And a lot of companies are not looking at community volunteering as a way to recruit people coming into the community, coming into their companies. So I've been volunteering in the community anywhere from 7 to 10 years. And my background is in recruitment marketing. My name is Kathleen Smith, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer of a company called clearjobs.net and cybersecjobs.com. And in my volunteering, I've had the great honor of meeting with so many people who devote so many hours to putting on amazing conferences like this BSides, or like DEF CON, or Hacker Halted, or a variety of conferences throughout the community. But no one has actually talked about how this helps you with your career. So I've asked 2 really great volunteers to step forward and sort of share their story. But then we also have one of our volunteers, Doug Monroe, who is also a recruiter who has been in this community, and how he would recommend people look at their volunteering for career development. So our volunteers are Cindy Jones and Doug Monroe, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves. Cindy?
Cool. As Kathleen mentioned, my name is Cindy Jones. I am a principal security consultant with Rapid7. I have been in the information security field for about 13 years now, and in IT for a much longer period of time. My volunteer career path has been interesting. It was definitely an evolution, and we'll get into some details behind that in a little bit, but
So you're at DEF CON, you're at BSides.
oh my God, okay, so here we go. Let's go down the list of the annual conferences I volunteer at. BSides event in Texas. I live in San Antonio currently, so a lot of BSides events in Texas. I run registration for BSides Las Vegas. It's about it's a half-time job through most of the year through the conference. Run second in charge for workshops for DEF CON. I am called upon staff for DerbyCon.
DEF CON China?
DEF CON China. I forgot about DEF CON China. Oh my gosh, yeah. So I worked DEF CON China for the beta this past year and have every intention of going back this year. There's a lot of things happening, and luckily I'm very fortunate in regards to how I'm able to support this desire for myself to maintain constant integration with the community through volunteerism. So we'll talk about that later too.
Doug?
I am Doug Monroe. I am the Director of Talent Acquisition for MAG Aerospace. Humble brag for us, we are the fastest growing aerospace company in the world. We focus primarily on intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. But as you can imagine, cyber is a big component of that, as well as some of the other operations that we do. Prior to this, I was in similar roles with Coalfire and the former Veris Group. And I've been fortunate, through Kathleen primarily, to be able to attend a number of events like this. And one of the really exciting things from a recruitment standpoint is that I don't think that there is enough conversation that goes on like this between job seekers, candidates, even just employees trying to further their career, and recruiters and management as to how the things that they do, how the things that you do can impact your career in a positive way. So it's an absolute pleasure for me. I've been here a number of times, a number of other events nationally and locally, and it's a kick. I love talking to people here.
So what are we going to be talking about today? So one is community involvement. Why do it? A lot of people are saying, all I hear about is volunteering is folding t-shirts or doing a bake sale or doing a car wash or something like that. But as you look at large conferences like this, there is so much that goes on behind the scenes. There's a lot of things that you see during the day people running around with their bunny ears or their t-shirts, but there's a lot that goes on. This is a year-long conference in the making. So what we're going to talk about in specific today is conference management, presenting, and competitions. And we're also going to have Doug share with us sort of what does a recruiter look at when he's looking at that experience, when he's talking to you in an interview or looking at your resume. We're also going to have Cindy and Doug touch on how would you engage your employer when you're talking about community volunteering. Some of the things that you may learn skills-wise, you may think that, I don't need to know how to run registration, but there are other skills that you can learn. Specifically, communication, program management, finance, there's a lot of different things to think about. And finally, how to handle stress. A lot of people think that this is easygoing, and it is not. It is an entirely new level of stress. And if you've seen any of the studies that are done out there now, Jack Daniel, a variety of other people big in the community, we all have stress, and then on top of it, we volunteer and we add to the stress. And throughout the presentation, I'm actually going to be sharing some results that we have found. I just completed a national global study on community volunteering and what people have learned to help their career and some of the things that they've found to lower their stress. So one of the things that came through from the survey that we did was the different kind of skills people felt that they learned by doing community volunteering. And remember, these are all technical people who are looking for other skills to learn. So collaboration and teamwork, really important in this day and age. A lot of, lone guns is not what we're looking at. We're looking at people who can collaborate with strangers. Communication skills. How do I translate what I need to someone who has not the same experience I do? Organizational skills. There are 1,800 people here today. That is a lot to organize and figure out how to get it going. Networking. Networking is going to be the #1 way you're going to find a job, and it is interesting. People are like, well, I know people that I know through D&D, or I know people who I've met at the beer hall or something like that. Being able to expand your network through volunteering in the community is a really great way to find your next job. Other things, time management, delegation, commitment, management, leadership, all these different skills that people are learning by volunteering. What was interesting to me is employer support. So a lot of times people don't even share with their employer that they're doing this volunteering. They just know that you're distracted at work, rather than being able to say, hey, I'm doing this other thing. So 62% of the people in this survey were actually provide paid time to volunteer. So this is a real big cue. Engage your employer in these discussions. 59% said that they stayed with their employer because of this support. So if you're an employer and you're looking for retention, being sure that your employees understand that you will pay them to volunteer and be ambassadors within the community. And volunteer support is one thing that people look at when they're looking for a new job. Or if you're not, it is something that you might want to look at. So since we're here at this very large conference, we're going to turn it over to Cindy, otherwise known as Registration Goddess, as far as her conference management, your sort of career track, how you started, how you engaged your employer, how you handled your paid time off, and I'll prime you if you miss something.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned before, I run the registration team for BSides Las Vegas. And if any of you have attended BSides Las Vegas, you have seen probably, I think we have about 15 different badge types running around. Each one of these has a separate way to register, a separate potential donation value for their badge. It's insane. So a lot of things go into running that. Prior to that, I also ran BSides San Antonio. Small conference, it was great. It was we probably had 300 people, but through engaging in these efforts, the skills that I learned that I've been able to translate back to day-to-day business use have been innumerable. For example, managing people. I've always had small teams working for me, probably for the past, 15 years or so. Teams of like 6 or 7, and it wasn't necessarily at the level of dealing with their pay grade, but just managing people, making sure tasks were getting done on time. That all changed when all of a sudden I've got a crew of 40 volunteers that I need to go ahead and have, taking care of things and, ensuring all the tasks getting done. So that was challenging, but it's something that I didn't have the opportunity to dive into until I was in a volunteer environment. Nobody's going to trust me with 40-something people because I've never done it before. Well, now I have, and being able to express this to my employer was amazing. It's spectacular. They were so excited to hear about it, and they said, "Well, it's only for one day." I'm like, "No. Let me tell you about my path through the course of the year in getting this conference going." So, managing people was a huge skill. Managing a budget. I was treasurer for my Girl Scout troop. I think I was like 14 at the time. That doesn't count. You're talking about literally bake sale money then. In this case, I'm dealing with it was a relatively small budget. It was only $20,000, but I dealt with this on an annual basis, and I always came in within $300 of that budget. That's a skill. I never knew I had that skill. I could barely balance my own checkbook, but when it comes to somebody else's money, I got this. So that was fun. Learning that, being able to translate that into spending for other events, and now expanding upon that to larger events as well. BSides Las Vegas this year is going to be expanding how we're handling things internal to the organization, so that's going to be a challenging thing. So I don't know, that was another area where I wouldn't have had the opportunity, to manage money like that, to manage how things were spent. And I always wanted everything to be perfect. So that's a fault there. Yeah, big stress point.
So since we're here in the DoD Center, when you started BSides San Antonio, how did you explain that to your employer, and how did you engage them? So
BSides being basically the grassroots, effort that it is throughout almost every arena. My goal was to bring community to San Antonio. I hadn't seen a lot of that. At the time, I was a DoD contractor. My bosses were all here. They had no idea what was going on in San Antonio. They didn't really care. From an employer support perspective, I didn't get any. It was out of sight, out of mind. It wasn't going to benefit them in any way, shape, or form, as far as they were concerned. They didn't know what skills I was going to be gaining, what I could bring back to my position because of those skills. They didn't have a clue. I used up all my leave time, used up all my sick time, going to conferences, organizing the conference, went in the red for leave time, actually. I had my paycheck docked when one contract rolled to the next one because I didn't have any leave time left. So that happened there. Huge transition. Went from doing DoD contracting to working for Rapid7, which is a position that I got because of community involvement. They came to me, recruited me, which was awesome. That's a very huge ego boost, by the way. And they were like, "No, we want you because of your community involvement." So I said, "Okay, so what does this mean? What is this going to mean to me?" And they said, "Well, we'll pay for you to go to conferences," and they do. Just about every conference I want to go to, unless it's something I don't want them necessarily to be involved with. They support me in all my volunteer efforts. Obviously, I still have a job to get done, so I get my job done, but then my time is mine.
So Doug, explain to us, if Cindy came to you as a job seeker, as a candidate, and she didn't have any of her volunteering on her resume, but you heard about it during the discussion, how would you recommend she would put conference management on her resume, and how would you want to hear about it in an interview?
Well, it's two different things, and obviously, little plug for later this afternoon, we are going to be doing resume reviews, and different people will say different things, but I would tend to say it should be on your resume within the bounds of reason. If you are a very active volunteer, you might not want to have a full page of it, or you might want to have a link on your resume that would take us to a different page, but it should definitely be listed. And then it's going to be incumbent upon you to notice when the opportunity is to begin to speak about it. If we're asking you if you led a team, and if so, what was the project? Well, besides any professional experience you have in that regard, you can bring up the volunteering. To the point that Kathleen made and what Cindy's alluded to, all of those skills translate. If you are speaking at a conference, if you're on a panel, if you're organizing, if you're doing registration, all of these things require skills that translate into any other part of the job that you're doing. And I want to know about it, because it's going to be the same questions that I ask. If you tell me about some pen testing effort that you led. I'm going to ask you specific questions about what you did, what were the obstacles that you faced, how did you overcome them. I'm going to do the same thing with the volunteerism, because those skills are just as vital. And I think something that often gets lost in technical fields, and certainly cyber is absolutely that, is that your audience is not always technical. They're going to need to hear things at multiple levels of understanding. So your ability to speak to a broad audience and convey the information that you have that they need is vital. And all of this sort of experience, both the organization but also the presentation of ideas and information, is vital to your career path. And it does translate. So I would say, again, make sure it's on the resume. I tend to recommend you put it at the end, but there will be opportunities where you can make the connection. Hey, they're asking me about this. I did this with BSides DC, and we'll talk about it at length.
So what's interesting is it's not necessarily just listing the conferences on your resume or on your social media profile, but it's actually listing the role that you played. And then if it is a major role, like what Cindy's been doing, conference management, finance, securing sponsorship, handling volunteers, those are different things that you're going to want to list. I mean, a lot of people think volunteer management is very easy, and it is one of the hardest things to do because you don't have a carrot or stick with the people who are supposed to show up. I mean, I don't know if you saw my Twitter feed over the last few days, but there were a lot of volunteers who were supposed to show up for tomorrow's event to help out here, and they all bailed. Okay, how do you, as a manager, how do you, as someone who, you can't penalize them for not showing up, but you have to scramble and you have to find people to show up. Well, what's interesting is being able to translate that on your resume as people management, being able to say that you're a leader, that people do show up when you ask them to show up, and you can hold them accountable. But Doug, can you touch a little bit on, if you see someone is listing, I mean, if you saw Cindy's conference schedule, which DEF CON China, DEF CON, BSides Las Vegas, DerbyCon, Hacker Halted, BSides San Antonio, BSides Nashville, all of the different ones, wouldn't you think that you're just paying for her to go to all these conferences?
I do have a different perspective, because of course I've known enough people that do volunteer at that level that I would tend to look at it differently, but there are recruiters and managers, hiring managers, who might look at it in that way. So again, I would say if you've got a full page of these things, you might want to cherry pick the ones that are really significant and where your role was significant and where your role can translate into other things that you do. But as a recruiter personally, I look at it as the involvement. I will assume that Rapid7 is happy with the work that Cindy puts out, or else she wouldn't be working there anymore. So it again becomes a strength. You're able to manage a full-time job with full-time responsibilities, full-time expectations, and yet you are still active in the community and broadening your skills. All of that is a positive.
So another aspect of community involvement, not necessarily community volunteering, is competitions. And I will have lots of students or people who are looking to get into the industry say, I have no experience, but they'll say that they've been part of lots of competitions. And I think this is a very big overlook, not looked at very clearly area where people don't realize that they can gain experience. But some of the things that they don't realize is, when you go into a competition, you have a time constraint, you have a resource constraint. You are meeting new people that you don't know, and you're trying to communicate with them in a stressful situation. I don't know about you, but that sounds like my everyday workday at my 9-to-5 job. So if you're able to relate those same skills, those same challenges that you have in a competition on your resume, you may not have the work experience, but you actually have the community experience. So be sure that whenever you're part of a competition, you actually take a few moments after the competition and say, okay, what was the challenge? What did I learn? What did I mess up? And what was the overall situation? Because you're going to go into an interview or a phone interview and you're going to be asked, what was the situation that you messed up on? And you may not remember that, but you may remember something in a competition that you didn't remember. It's also an opportunity to expand your network. You're sitting across the table from somebody, and the person at the other across the table, you guys click. I hope that rather than after the competition and high-fiving and grabbing a beer, you guys are actually talking about, hey, what company do you work with? Do they support you being part of here? Realize that your overall competition network is one that's going to help you in your skill set. So, Doug, you've done some recruiting through competitions. You want to talk a little bit more about how you look at competitions on a resume or in a social media profile?
Well, you took everything I had, Kathleen.
I'm sorry. So, Doug.
And those couple of folks that are leaving have no idea what they're about to miss. But having said that, Kathleen's absolutely right. And not only those softer skills that she's relating to that we've already touched on, but this is specific. This is industry specific. You are performing tasks that you could perform in a professional setting. It's vital. I'm going to ask every single question that she just asked. What was your role? What were the challenges? What went right? What went wrong? So gathering your notes afterwards is significant because all of those questions are going to come up. But I look at it again as it is community involvement. More importantly, it's an ongoing effort to broaden your skills, try new things. And honestly, it doesn't matter if you come in first or 30th, you're typically going to be part of a team. It's what you did within that role. And very often in these competitions, you'll start out with a team of 3 or 4, and somebody's going to drop out. That's a key moment. What did you do to overcome? So you don't have to win everything, you just have to play the game. And all of those things are very important to us when we evaluate, and particularly if you don't necessarily have as much professional experience as somebody else who might be doing this. But I can't emphasize enough, goes for IT in general, but it really goes to cyber. It is such a fluid industry. It's a constant back and forth, adversaries and good guys. And because it's so ever changing, if you're just going to get your degree and get a couple of certifications and kind of glide through your career, you may do okay, but you're going to fall behind. The people that are going out, competing, broadening their skills, those are the ones we want. They have a passion for it, because that's ultimately, cybersecurity is every bit as vital as the floating platforms that my company employs. It is the defense of everything we hold dear. So if you don't have a passion for it and aren't trying to push yourself forward, you're probably not going to be as successful, and you're probably not the person that we want. And when apples to apples, everything else is about the same between you and someone else, that's going to win every single time.
We had a really interesting question at a previous presentation when someone said, well, I can't get to all of the competitions. And I can't get to, BSides DC to be able to volunteer. Well, there is this thing called the internet, and there is this thing about doing it online. So Cindy and I both volunteer for BSides Las Vegas. Everything is done through Slack, email, and phone calls. Yeah. We only see each other at the actual conference. So if you want to be a volunteer to any of these conferences, or if you want to compete, realize that a lot of this is already done online. You can be gaining your experience online without even having to be face-to-face. The other thing is, if you're looking to switch industries, this is also a really great way to build experience and expand your network. There's a cyber policy CTF, there is the car hacking, there are energy CTFs. I mean, there is a CTF for almost every single industry. So if you're looking to poke your head into switching industries, you might want to look at one of the online CTFs. So Cindy, we're going to have you switch gears and talk a little bit more about presenting.
Okay.
So everyone thinks that, it's just the cool kids club that gets picked to stand up here and get a speaker badge. Cindy, you want to explain what it takes to present at Derby or Grace Hopper or we got denied for Grace Hopper.
Yeah, that's a little bit of an inside joke.
Yes.
Yeah, we weren't diverse enough, which is a totally different thing. Anyways, so one of the things you have to be willing to do is accept some rejection. That's all there is to it. You're going to get no's. I know some people who every single conference they've submitted to, they've been accepted. I'm like, what is your magic sauce? I don't understand this. You're going to get rejected from a lot of conferences. You're going to get rejected from conferences that you volunteer at that you think, well, they know who I am. Don't they want to pick me? Yeah, it's not about the cool kids. There's a lot of conspiracy theories that there's a huge amount of nepotism, and you only see the cool kids speaking a lot of the time because they know how to work the system. They know how to present their ideas in a manner that the CFP review board is going to say, this sounds like a logical flow, a logical topic, And the people will be interested in this. They've been doing it enough to where it kind of by rote, happens automatically for them as they're writing these things out. That takes practice. If you don't get the practice in and get rejected, it's just no, it's okay. You can move forward and continue again. If you can, ask for feedback for those rejections. A lot of times they'll give you feedback. Grace Hopper said we weren't diverse enough. Okay, I saw the submission. It looked pretty darn good to me, but that's cool. So, ask for the feedback. Take the feedback. They're not saying anything to be mean to you. They're just telling you how you might improve your submission. Yeah, that's okay. So another perspective that you need to go ahead and consider. So once you've gotten accepted, right, you've went ahead and you've drawn up this outline. They may have asked you for your slides in advance. You're probably going to alter your slides in advance, or at least get a very solid, detailed outline. Now you've been accepted. So now you know in 2 months, 3 months, whenever the case may be, you've got to basically write this talk. You not only have to write this talk, you have to be able to present this talk. In order to present this talk, you need to practice. You need to practice, practice, practice. If you're putting this off for too long, and some of us might be really good at procrastinating,
you learn about your procrastination
oh
tactics.
my gosh, because all of a sudden it's 2 weeks before the event and you haven't written the slide yet. Oh my gosh. So this is something else you need to work on and build from. Practicing speaking in front of people can be challenging for a lot of us. I mean, we as an industry, I think primarily, if we were to do the research, I think it shows that a lot of us are introverts. Getting up and speaking on a stage in front of a group of people, especially your peers, that's terrifying for a lot of folks. It's really not that bad. They're there to hear what you have to say because they're interested in what your opinion is. So that's brilliant. That's a great opportunity for you to be able to expand outside of your comfort zone and build as a human being.
So the other thing about presentations is knowing the CFP timeline. I just finished doing all of my presentations, proposals for BSides San Francisco and RSA, which are next March. So if you're not doing the research and the time management of being able to think of a year from now, what topic do I want to talk about, you're not going to be able to figure out sort of the timeline of submitting your proposals. And as Cindy said, you have to be able to write what you're speaking about in 6 different ways. You have to be able to do a short abstract. You have to do a long abstract. You then have to convince the CFP review board as to why this is important. Those are the 3 things I had to do for BSides San Francisco. And then also, what are some of the objectives that you want the audience to get through? There are many, many different platforms. I wish I could say that there was one way to submit a CFP, but there isn't. So you have to keep in mind, okay, I really like this conference. Next June is ThoughtCon or Circle City Con. Keeping an eye on either their Twitter handle or their website when they say a call for papers is out. And then actually take down the form of what you're going to have to fill out, because sometimes it's a Google form, sometimes it's a conference management software, sometimes it is something that's completely, just an Excel spreadsheet. A lot of times in the industry, the proposals are stripped of who is presenting, their social media profile, everything. It is just based on your content. So it isn't just, hey, I did this really great patch and I want to share it with the world. It is being articulate enough to be able to convey your thoughts in 200 words or 500 words, and then being able to spend time on Google Images and figure out what image you want for your presentation. I am, horrible. I will spend, my procrastination is being on Google Images and trying to figure out what sort of image is out there. So I change that all the time. And as Cindy said, it's a lot of rejection. And it's understanding that you might have your feelings constantly hurt because you think that they don't like you. You are not conveying your ideas in a way that your industry peers can understand it. That is a learning opportunity. So Doug, let's talk a little bit about someone who's a big presenter. We had Megan, who was on our panel before, talk about how she submits for all of these different conferences. What do you want to see? What do you want to hear from a candidate that says, I present everywhere? Do you want to hear about, what a great speaker they are, or do you want to go a little bit deeper?
To be honest, I would assume if they're getting the call that many times, they are a good speaker. It's more significant to me that it's the preparation. It is that content preparation. It is creating something, as I spoke about a moment ago, that a broad audience can understand and grasp. And then when I say broad, not just the dummies like me that don't understand the technical aspects of it, but peers. So if you're able to put together that content in a constructive way that you can convey to people, that's significant to me, and I'm going to ask you how you did it. What was the reaction? How did the audience take it? What sort of questions were they asking? But then also going back to the things that didn't work, what did you learn from them? How did you become a better presenter? Because at the end of the day, and that's something that I run into all the time, because it is such a technical field, there are folks who are brilliant, can do extraordinary things, hack into things that they really shouldn't just for sport. None of it matters if you can't put it into a format that somebody else can take value from. And at the end of the day, with Coalfire, we were the leading FedRAMP assessor anywhere. So you had to have the technical skills to be able to conduct the assessment, but it didn't matter because the deliverable, the thing that gets paid for, the thing that keeps all of the lights on, keeps us paid, goes to a customer who may or may not have the level of expertise. That's a key element. So if you're presenting, you're creating content, you're creating something that others can take in and get value from, that is very similar to the deliverables that you ultimately have to produce for customers. And so those are the areas that I'm probably going to ask you about, and that's where the presentation skills come in handy. And not to mention, when you're trying to get business, when you're the SME that's standing next to the sales guy, and you're trying to explain why your company, your team is the best one to give them what they need, you're going to have to present. Maybe it's a small room with a half dozen executives, maybe it's a huge room. Whatever it is, if you've done it, that's significant to us.
Indeed. The other thing to think about when you're doing presentations is understanding if you're representing your employer or not. And that is a big question that you have to make the internal decision on, and maybe speak to some of your coworkers or your manager if you're presenting at a conference and if you're expressing their views or not. That's very interesting in this industry. A lot of people choose not to let everyone know where they work. They choose not to use their business handle or anything like that. But it's also going back to your company and saying, I have something that I want to present about, and start negotiating the process within your company if they're going to support you in your presentations or not. You are an ambassador for them. If you're talking about the work that you're doing, and if it's non-cleared work, you might be, surprised. They might want to support you in doing this. When we were doing this presentation at DerbyCon, we had someone who was on the panel who, learned her skills through competitions. She works for a large financial institution. It took 9 months to get approval for her to present at DerbyCon. So I actually submitted the proposal to her last year to go up her chain of management. So you need to understand who needs to have approval within your company to be able to present. And then ask them, what kind of support? Not only will they pay for your travel or pay for your conference, are they going to help you create the presentation? Are they going to help you with the practicing? You might be surprised at how much support you would get within the company. When I did a workshop 2 years ago to get more women into the community presenting, one of the people who was in that workshop was a woman who said, I have all of these ideas, but I have never put them down in an abstract. She went home from the workshop and put together 6 abstracts, and then made a goal for 2017 to present 12 times. And she actually did. And her company, a very, very large commercial integrator, paid for her to go to Brazil, to Spain, all over the world, because she was brilliant, but she was such an introvert and didn't want to get out there, and realized that this was a huge growth opportunity for her. And it actually led to her, being able to find another job. So, of all of the kinds of community volunteering or being involved in the community, presentations, I would say, would be one of the hardest.
Indeed.
But it is also something that pushes you out of your comfort zone and gives you opportunities to learn presentation skills, being able to write your thoughts, being able to convey to non-technical people. So let's talk about the other aspect of volunteering, stress. So what's interesting is when I did this survey, 98% of the people said that they found community involvement very fulfilling. But at the same time, more than half of them also shared it stressed them out. 94% of them actually believed that it had a positive impact on the community. And I found that this was really very enlightening to me because we hear so much negativity about our community. We hear so many bad things out there, yet we are the one community that is most driven by community involvement and volunteering. And I think it's great that most of the community feels, even though they're stressed out with volunteering, even though they're stressed out by, managing different timelines, and if volunteers are going to show up, people still volunteer. They still want to go out into the community. Oops, sorry. But I find it very interesting that there is actually nothing out there that helps us with our stress. A lot of people talk about the stress that they feel is psychological, anxiety, depression. These are all the things, the people you see running around here who are so happy are actually some of the people who are the most depressed or have the most anxiety. But they're out there all the time. Yes, we realize getting out into the community is a way to overcome a lot of that. But Cindy, you want to touch on some of the stressful points that you have felt with BSides San Antonio, or even going to DEF CON China? That
was a whole different ballgame.
How did you handle your personal development of going from being Miss Perfectionist to letting things go?
So when I first joined the information security hacker community, whatever you would want to call it, I was very much, I'd go to a talk at DEF CON and I'd go back to my room. The people were not something I wanted to interact with necessarily. I didn't want to be involved with anything. I wanted to learn. And I did, and I took, and it was wonderful.
You watched the videos, the streaming.
I did. Well, when they started doing the streaming, I did start watching the streaming, so I didn't even have to go to the rooms, which was great. I realized that is not a healthy, a little epiphany happened. It's not necessarily a healthy way to live your life, is taking all the time. So I decided to give back. And the easiest way for me to give back was to say, hey, do you guys need any help? It also put me in a position where I was putting myself in groups of people that I normally would not interact with in any way, shape, or form. These are people that just weren't, they weren't my standard group of folks. Not a big deal, but it was taking a risk in that regard. And it was a successful risk. Wow, that was hard. I met my tribe. All through college, people say, oh, you finally meet your people. Well, I never met my people. I met my people at DEF CON. I met my people, volunteering for BSides Austin the first year that it was there. I met my people at places like this, rooms like this, with people like you, which was awesome. So I started giving back. And that, I am a type A personality, so if I start doing something, I really do something. And so I jumped in with both feet. So it started off, I was just going to go ahead and work with BSides Austin on a volunteer level. Hey, Cindy, we'd really like to have a BSides down in San Antonio. Would you be interested in doing that? No. No. Okay, yeah, let's do this. So it became this thing, and I became an obsessive volunteer. I was already working for BSides Las Vegas by that point, and I just took on BSides San Antonio. I had a spectacular support network. Had I not, I would have crashed and burned. Dealing with personnel issues there, I took everything on myself because the people that I had requested help from were not able to step up and do things the way I would anticipate them being done, because I am a perfectionist. So that was another skill that I learned, is how to let go of things. But yeah, I became a little bit obsessive with that, and taking things on. When I continue to do so, I have a hard time saying no.
Yeah, I think that is one of our biggest challenges within the community, is saying no, and thinking that we need to do it all. And I think that is a lot of times that people become siloed because they believe that they need to do it all and they need to do the job perfectly. And what you find when you're in a community engagement, when you're in the community, you realize there are other people you can lean on, especially if they are strangers. So what's interesting that I always ask people when they come to volunteer with me is, what are the other things that you're looking for? What are the growth opportunities that you're looking for? And one of the things that is not taught in our careers, in any careers, is succession planning. How do you move on from this particular role? Cindy is no longer part of BSides San Antonio, but she had to think ahead of the time, who is going to take over the organization?
2 years.
And 2 years. I mean, and why don't you talk a little bit more about how you handled succession planning? I mean, did they teach you that at Rapid 7?
No, that was actually pre-Rapid 7, so no, absolutely not. But I did learn it through my volunteer work and creating I called it my baby. It was my baby. I was the one doing all the work for BSides San Antonio. Like I said, 300-person conference, not a big deal, not a huge budget, but still something I had put my heart and soul into, as well as all my PTO. So when I realized that it was becoming a little bit much for me, and with the understanding that I was having a difficult time delegating aspects of it, I decided to start planning for handing basically passing the baton along. That made it easier for me to help delegate. It helped me delegate a little bit more, knowing that this is going to be a responsibility of somebody else coming down the line. So that was additional. That was very helpful, and I was super fortunate to select for my successor a great guy who has taken this conference. And as I mentioned, it took 2 years to do this, but he has taken this conference from a little 300-person conference to about 500 people. We've got villages. So much wonderful is going on there. And to see it grow, and I can say, I started this, and it's so much better now. And that's so satisfying. I mean, my whole goal in life is to help people and to make things better. And when I see something that actually has gotten better because of something I started, super satisfying from a personal perspective.
So, Doug, do you want to touch on, just sort of these management skills, and how do you want those conveyed in an interview or on a resume?
Well, I think we've touched on it in a number of ways during this conversation. Everything that you do translates. So just as Kathleen mentioned, think about it, not just the competitions you do, but the volunteerism that you might participate in. What did you do? What was the outcome? What were the challenges? What was your role? How did you fit in? And write it all down. Think about it. When we're talking about it, it's a great opportunity for you to relate those very real management skills to what you can do in your profession, in the cyber world. So it seems like you can just do it and you know it and you can talk about it, but the act of writing it down, organizing your thoughts, and really looking at, analyzing what was your role, what did you do, what did you take from it, that's going to be key to your ability to convey something in an interview and present yourself as someone who can take on a larger role.
And it's not only in your job search, but it is also, in your current employment. I mean, we're not all looking for our next job, but you may be looking to stay with your employer, but you're looking for a bigger role. You're looking for a bigger opportunity. You want to have a different career strategy. One thing that is not taught in companies is for managers or hiring managers or recruiters how they coach and counsel the people that are working inside the company to stay with the company and move on in different roles. They don't want to lose you, and you don't want to go out and try to find a new job. So using all of these skills, all of these tips that we have shared during this presentation, take that to your current employer and say, I want to build a career strategy within this company, and these are the things that I've been doing in the community that can help this company. So some of my final thoughts in community volunteering is a really great way to stretch your mind. And I always look at community volunteering as a way to work on some development challenges or professional development challenges that I don't have any other opportunity to work on. My best example, and there's only one person in the room who will understand this example, is I had someone on one of my groups that I was always butting heads with. And no matter what phone conversation we were in or face-to-face conversation in, we butt heads like there was nobody's business, and we would always walk out of the room really mad. And I realized, well, I couldn't try that sort of work situation in my personal life with my husband, or I would have had a divorce. I couldn't really work on that situation in my professional development or in my profession because my staff would leave me. So I use this community volunteering board opportunity to sort of examine, okay, this is a challenge that I have in my life. I butt heads with people. And I realized time and time again, the reason why they were butting heads with me is because I wasn't listening. I wasn't giving them the opportunity to say their piece, and I needed to just shut up. And once I stopped trying to talk all the time and listen to the people who were on my board, I actually was able to lower the stress and tension level within that organization. And I always look at community volunteering as personal development in addition to professional development. It's a lot cheaper than paying for a lot of therapy. So Doug, Cindy, some final thoughts on community volunteering? Cindy, you can go first, and then Doug.
So one of the things I found when I was working for the DoD, and I mean, I was able to present to the Chief of Staff for the Air Force, for Air Force personnel. That was kind of exciting, but I had the ability to present to them based upon a very clear set of rules, which at the time was, I think was still, it was DIACAP at the time. So I was able to say, this is what is happening and this is how it's going. And I could point directly back to a very clear set of rules that they were required to follow. Volunteering and being able to express myself in different formats has given me the ability to now become a little more articulate when it comes to less, I guess, prescriptive levels of security. Now I'm presenting to boards of directors saying, this is what you need to do, and it's a little bit more ambiguous as far as why you need to do it, and have that ability to be able to express those thoughts and everything in a clearer format, because I'm having to, on CFP, when I'm doing CFPs, be able to articulate to different types of groups of people, volunteer organization, when I'm going in and I'm talking to the caterers who have no clue what we're doing, to the lighting guys who kind of have an idea of what they're doing, but they don't know what we're trying to get across, and being able to spread this communication ability across all these different areas, that has helped me out tremendously. Another real quick story, when Kathleen and I were preparing to do the first iteration of this panel, I went to my leadership, and because Rapid7 is very involved in the community. And I said, so, you know, I'm doing this on community involvement, and, you know, what do you, you know, what got Rapid7 involved? They told me the story about, you know, Metasploit coming into the community, being community involved because of Metasploit, and it just evolved from there. And I said, well, you guys know I'm really involved with lots of aspects of the community. I said, what do you guys have? Do we have any resources in place that would help if I find myself like overcommitting? And this is the VP of HR, says, you know, we don't. That's a great idea. Would you like to help lead that? Guess what? So, yeah. So once again, overcommitting to yourself, overcommitting your time, volunteering for things you never knew you were going to be a part of, that's something to be aware of and to try to manage to the best of your ability and be a little bit particular on what you're going to go ahead and select your efforts, your energy be put into.
Doug?
Not my strong suit, but I'll try to be concise. Two things that I wanted to say. One, if you are an employer or if you are in the process of trying to sell the idea of the volunteerism to your employer, using a specific example with Veris Group, we had hard data. People in the company who were active in their professional communities had higher personnel evaluations. And this was consistent and by a significant enough margin that it was a noteworthy figure. We had an elite pen testing team at Veris Group, rose to about almost 30 people. We, during one calendar year, had 0 attrition. Ask any recruiter, ask any HR person, that will never happen on a team of 30. They were so active in the community, so networked with people outside of the company, it was clear that there was a connection. So if you're trying to sell it as an employer or to an employer, it's hard data. And then about networking, we talk about it a lot. I don't know if we really delve into it as deeply as we should. It's not just showing up, meeting some people, talking about things. That's awesome. Get their names, get their contact information, follow up. See if there's anything out there that you can participate in through those new connections and maintain them. Seems like a daunting task, you know, a bunch of people, it takes a lot of time, but it doesn't necessarily take as much as you might think. But if you just meet them at an event and then walk away, it's not going to do you nearly the good that ongoing contact. And to give a personal example that is outside of cyber, but I'm fortunate to have done some things with a local recruiting group. First panel I ever did, shout out Matt Duran at Tenable. It's a recruiting organization, And the last 2 jobs that I've taken, both coming in situations where I was in an employment situation that I knew I needed to get out of, reached out to people that I had met through recruiting organizations, and the jobs came to me. And it's a small thing, but it's huge. The last 2 jobs I've gotten, I've loved. And the reason for it is because I didn't have to go out and just throw my resume at everything under the sun. I had people out there who knew of opportunities. They knew me well enough to know what might be a good opportunity for me, and they helped get me into the right place. So I cannot emphasize enough. Networking is an active commitment, but it pays off. The dividends are immeasurable.
So we're out of time. We actually ran over. Does anyone have any questions? Or if you don't have any questions, we'll be around. We have another panel. So was this an okay presentation?